Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. and the United States as we're looking around the globe for those 1,000 best practices, the technology, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we feel the effects and impacts as far as climate change is concerned and the increased violence and the destruction that's happening with what we call human-made and natural disasters, is how we're going to be able to move through the 21st century, and we'll have about 2 billion new people on the planet by 2050. This is a very real issue. And of course, the main issue, of course, is water. And what we're finding out in many of these major violent weather events, as they're now being called, is that water really is the first to go, the last to come back, and is the greatest need to everyone. And we have someone coming on that's going to actually be talking about this, how to have alternative systems to what normally in the United States and most of the developed world think of the grid-based, if you will, water systems where you turn on the tap and the water comes out and then all of a sudden it's not there. This is Joseph A. Silva. He's a Senior Vice President and General Manager North America for what's called Icon Technology Systems. He's going to be coming in by Skype. And sitting right beside me is our good friend that comes from time to time as a special guest. This is Dan Bicz. He's the managing member for Pangea Water Solutions. And Dan, welcome back.
Thank you, Sam.
And Joseph, I understand you're already here with us by Skype.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We're glad to have you, and thank you for being here. And the title of this is a kind of Water Purification 101, but really in the time as far as the violent weather events and climate change, and there's just, it's amazing, Joseph, the amount of change that's going on as far as water delivery in light of all that's happening. So tell us a little bit first about Icon Technology Systems, and let's get in really to the essence of all this, all about water.
Sure, absolutely, and thank you. So first off, Icon Technology, water is all that we do. So I worked for a company of 20 years that focused primarily on carbon and reverse osmosis. With the introduction of the Icon life systems, we now have introduced called nanofiltration, which we'll get into shortly. But our products will provide water purification either for individuals on the residential commercial sectors, but also in the third world countries for non-potable areas where you can't get.
Yeah, and that's the humanitarian part of that. And of course, whenever you have these extreme weather events, I mean, you really at that humanitarian, whether it's in the United States, Germany, or the middle of Uganda, I mean, we have to do
absolutely.
that. But looking at what are the different types of water purification systems that are available, and we're going to share some slides that you've provided for us so that our viewers will be able to see these and really understand, because most people, Joseph, as you know, have no idea where the water comes from. It's just out there somewhere. They turn on the tap and they have it in most cases.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's easiest to describe this. I call this Water Filtration 101. We'll start with the municipalities that everybody has a basic understanding of how that functions, and how it works. But well, the two main common be carbon and reverse osmosis. But let's look at our municipalities to begin with. So our municipalities have robust infrastructures to get water from the distribution facilities to the end user. Now, what people don't realize is there are miles and miles of pipe go from those facilities to that end user. And say you're 50 miles from the manufacturing facility, they have to put enough chlorine to have a residual at that last person. So chlorine is typically one item that they use to disinfect the water to get the biologicals out. Then it has to travel miles of pipes, which are of different structures, anywhere from what they had used 200 years ago to more recently the fiber products that they're distributing out of today. But they vary. So if you use Boston actually had hollowed out trees with tar on the inside that was used as their first plumbing or piping. So they have to get the water distributed to consumers so that it's safe and meets the EPA and FDA guidelines. Where we come in the water filtration system is we use that as the first filter of our systems. So the municipalities have provided us a water source that's potable, it's drinkable. They are removing or reducing down to approved levels of contaminants that may be in the water. Then it comes to us to use the carbon and reverse osmosis systems to purify those water systems. When you take that
Go ahead.
functionality.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. There was a.
Go ahead. Please, Joseph.
When you take that same functionality and say you can use carbon filtration, which gets down to removing the typical E. coli bacteria, what we're pretty common with. Thank you. We're pretty commonly familiar with E. coli bacteria. Well, carbon filtration will reduce that just based on the pore size. And I'll get into micron ratings here, but just as a general overview, carbon is great for getting out the majority of the chlorine, the lead, odor, taste, sediment, and some of the minor contaminants that may be in the water above a 0.5 micron or above, which E. coli is. When you have some of the heavy contaminants and biologicals, and even some chemical and mineral biologicals or contaminants that may be in the water, reverse osmosis is needed. Now that gets down to a much finer size as far as pores. However, it does waste water or rinse water, and it takes water to manufacture it. So there's a debate on reverse osmosis systems and how much water they actually use to produce. Typically, it takes 3 gallons of water to make 1 gallon of product water. But in households and commercial applications, we look at bottled water or other filtration devices. People used to drink it straight out of the tap. Well, you can't do that here in the States anymore for the past 10, 15 years because of all the biocontaminants and the contaminants. You think about the pharmaceuticals. When you're through with them, what do? You dump them down the toilet. You flush it. That goes to the municipality. Now we have to deal with that. So people are familiar with carbon and reverse osmosis as ways to treat water. And bottled water was once a luxury. Now it's almost a need to have. And people are turning to these two technologies using municipalities as the first source.
Yeah, looking at this, but we need to move on a little bit, Joseph.
Sure.
Dan, why don't you go ahead and ask your next question?
Yeah, Joseph, tell us, what is ultrafiltration and how does it work?
Perfect. So now you can put that other slide up. Having the understanding of how municipalities work, the ultrafiltration system is a portable device. If you want to think of it as, that's not my slide, but that's fantastic. If you want to look at the different technologies, there's iodine tablets, there's chlorine tablets, boiling water. Ultrafiltration uses something very similar to a carbon block, but a smaller membrane size. It's kind of a combination between a membrane of an RO, and it gets down to what we refer to as nanofiltration. And nanofiltration, in the simplest terms, is if you're funneling down from, say, 3 microns down to what our hollow fiber membranes are, 0.15 microns, you're actually getting down to a sub-virus level. So nanofiltration is a way to purify water to remove the contaminants, the biocontaminants, bacteria, cysts, and viruses without the need of electricity and without the need for any chemicals. So I've displayed a few of those that were common, but let's kind of get into the biological contaminants a bit, and we'll break down nanofiltration technologies. So on the left of the screen basically shows you what a red blood cell is. E. coli bacteria is probably one of the most common things that we have here in the States, and it's typically 0.68 by 1 microns wide. So in most carbon applications, they're 0.5. They can't squeeze through. When you start getting down into the virus level, the polio, hepatitis, and meningitis, those are typically 0.2 microns. And I'll refer to a transition slide on the bottom that gives you a reference of microns to nanometers. As you look at the slides, the pore sizes of our hollow fiber membranes are 15 microns or 0.015 nanometers. So essentially what's happening is you're pressurizing water from the outside. Anything smaller than that 0.015 micron size will get through. All of the contaminants and biologicals will be captured on the other side. And what you're left with is purified drinking water.
That's absolutely what you want. How did all the information that you're giving us, how does that relate not only to the technologies that you're using, but to the consumer themselves? How do they have the comfort that, you know, what they're getting is as pure water as they possibly can? Because as you said, I mean, now there's really tens of thousands of chemicals that are going into the water every day. And a lot of them, they don't even know what they are. That's the
So you look at the different variations of water purifications, you're really trying to get down to that viral level. And the question that we always ask is, how much water is on the earth today as there was 10,000 years ago? The answer is simple, the same amount. We repurpose that, and it continues to get heavier and heavier in contaminants. Again, in the States, we have the luxury of having an infrastructure that can actually process that as the first filter. But you start looking at third world countries, they don't have that luxury. So they have to use a different device that can give them security, where we're not too concerned about viruses in the States today. And I'll state that today. There are cases that are coming up with natural water sources in the United States that are having viral impacts. You go outside of the United States, and we all know about Mexico. You don't drink the water there because you get the quick step. Well, those are biocontaminants that we are fortunate to have those reduced from our municipalities, but in third world countries, they're not as privileged. So making sure that you have a filtration device that can remove what's in that water safely, certified, and documented is absolutely critical.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. You and I talked about this, the certification. We'll talk about that later. But what's a fail-safe technology?
Great question.
And we got to be quick. We only have about a minute and a half left to get through all this.
No worries. No worries. So fail-safe is very easy to describe. The fail-safe is, if it's smaller than 0.015 microns, it's not getting through. What our system will do is it will collect the material on the opposite side of the membrane. Once that membrane is completely full and coated, no water can get through, which means that no contaminants can get through. Your fail-safe is, once it stops working, you get slow flow, low flow, or no flow, time to change out the filter.
No, so that makes it very simple. Okay, Dan, and you got to be quick in your question, and I have one last one, Joseph.
Sure.
Joseph, what health and safety certifications does Lifesaver have, and why are these so important for the consumer and the aid agency to know?
Yeah, not having a lot of time left, I'll state it very simply. You know, some people say that they had dinner in London. If you didn't get outside of the airport, you didn't go to London. There are different certifications that you absolutely have to have. You can claim those certifications, but if you don't have the actual documents, it doesn't exist. The two that we rely on very heavily, and they're available on our website, is NSF Protocol 231. There's a 2-part test of that. Our products pass the entire thing. It's a 6-day and a 5-day test afterwards. Just make sure you're looking at the documentations and certifications that they back up what they're claiming.
And what do you see for the spread of certifications? You got about 10 seconds.
Spread for certifications. Make sure that you have virus reduction to NSF 31, the full 10-day test.
This is Joseph Silva. This is Dan Bicz. Great, the EmeraldPlanet.
I surrender.
All right, pal. Get ready for the day, buddy.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
What's that?
Do we have a gun?
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made this vacation happen.
Double points with every purchase?
Cleverly merging promotions,
Love it.
cross-referencing travel sites, and booking all your flights with those.
Vouchers. I got us bumped.
They were like, oh. But now they're like, aloha. You aced this vacation. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
I tried Oxy at a couple of parties. I thought I had it under control. I didn't know it'd be this addictive. I didn't know how far I'd go to get more.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
What to expect when you're expecting
Like here.
a teenager.
Today, I'm going to show you how to teen-proof your home. First step, hide the car keys. Preferably somewhere they would never look. Challenges will come up. Be ready for them. Hi, honey.
Ready for the... Mom, You don't use mannequins in the mannequin challenge.
You don't have to know it all to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
We're back to the Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, welcome to the Emerald Planet as we look around the globe for what we call those best of the best technologies and the best practices that are being used. We're talking about water, why it's so critical, and many times it's water everywhere and not a drop to drink. If you look at many of these, what they call severe storms or severe weather events, like in Puerto Rico, in Houston, Texas, out in Bangladesh, India, China, places like that, is that you have massive flooding, and at the same time, there's just no water for people to drink. And so what are we going to do as we go to a planet that has 2 billion more people by 2050, going to almost 9 billion? And the fact is that only less than 1% of the water on the planet is actually potable water, something that we can actually drink. And so how do we add to that? But we have a gentleman that's a true expert in that. This is Joseph A. Silva. He's a Senior Vice President, General Manager, North America of what's called Icon Technology Systems, and they only deal in water. We want to announce that. He's coming in by Skype, and then Dan Bicz sitting right beside me, Managing Member, Pangea Water Solutions, LLC, and Dan is a regular visitor to Emerald Planet and serves in this function quite well. But Joseph, you're here by Skype. Welcome.
Hello, gentlemen.
Glad to have you here. Looking at potable water and having individual or community-based systems, which are standalone or brought in after the fact, when you have, municipal systems all over the United States, most of your developed world, many of them are regional systems. You have privately owned water systems, but yet we have these severe weather events, and the first thing that goes out is the water. I mean, where's the mismatch in all this? We're spending, actually trillions of dollars invested in water, and yet we still need to have these other, what you call fail-safe or backup systems.
Yeah, so I think the common phrase would be, I'm a former scoutmaster with Boy Scouts, be prepared is the motto. I think the challenge is that people aren't prepared for these catastrophic events or any of these flooding activities. We see real world applications of where our products are needed in third world countries. As we stated, municipalities have a solid infrastructure to deliver us a decent product. But what happens in third world countries or a compromised system where you don't think about the daily convenience of turning on the tap water and getting a glass of water? We see it in reality in third world countries after events such as Puerto Rico, Houston, Florida. Any event that happens, we're usually one of the last people to call, but one of the first thing that's needed.
Without water, you die. I mean, water is life. And
shelter, water, and food.
Yeah. Well, but water. Yeah, you can do without shelter for a while and food, but water, you have to have it. But what are you seeing as far as the perception that people have? You have the situation in Puerto Rico, Houston, Florida, Sandy up in New York, New Jersey, which they thought they would never see these kinds of events where you lose access to both your water and your sanitation at the same time, which is a dastardly thing. But many people are understanding that, these fail-safe systems supposedly actually are failing more and more. And that
absolutely
ties into climate change. So how are people's perception changing, and how do we as a society need to change with that?
Well, I think you're starting to see a shift in people realizing that they need to have what we refer to commonly as a bug out bag, or having some emergency kit. In the past, you just had a radio, you had a few Band-Aids and such. Now, the common staple would be, what are you going to do for your water source? I think more and more people are realizing that you can only live for a certain amount of time without water, so that has to be number one on their priority. We have ways of distributing through humanitarian relief efforts, but again, it's all about being prepared. And what we try and do is come up with products that are very simple and easy to use. You don't want to go through the hassle of having to boil water. You don't want to use chemicals. All those can be compromised. And what a lot of people don't think about is, yeah, it's the consumption water that you're actually using, but it's also how are you going to wash your hands? So you have to take care of the sanitary issues, but what are you going to wash your hands with? And if you're washing them with the same dirty water, and then you're using your hands to do other things, you've actually defeated the purpose. So it's not just the consumption of the water, but it's making sure that your hygiene is up, and providing a purified water or a way to get non-contaminated water to consume and to rinse is becoming a high priority. But again, we see this in third world countries as we're out and about delivering our products.
And the
It's
whole
the
thing
luxury
about
that we have of flipping the tap on.
Yeah, and the whole thing about it, Joseph, that we're understanding too is that even though we consider ourselves developed and we've got all this infrastructure and we kind of look askance at the developing world, actually they're starting to teach us things that we need to be aware of. And having been in 93 countries, 60 of those developing, I understand exactly what we need. Dan, I think you have the next question. And we're going to move along here, Joseph. You've got a lot to share,
Sure.
So we're going to move.
Yeah, Joseph, tell us how does the Lifesaver help emergency relief efforts, and why are there more and more uses for such portable purification solutions?
Wow, that's two big ones that stand out. So we'll use Puerto Rico as an example. When Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, the first response was, let's get them bottled water. And what we were trying to re-engage FEMA and the Red Cross was, all of these bottles of water that you're deporting or getting over into Puerto Rico for these people to use, you've got logistics of distribution that's extremely challenging, and how much water and when and how often do you deliver it, and how long does it stay on the docks before you're actually able to distribute it to the people that need it. Some of the areas in Puerto Rico, as you know, are quite mountainous and difficult to get to. So the first challenge is, once you have a bottle of water, how do you get it to people? Where the portable potable drinking systems that we have, you see a slide of our what we call a C2 or Community 2 system. That system will do 2 million liters of water. So you think about how many half liters or liter bottles of water that it will take to manufacture what this will. You can literally suffice an entire or take care of an entire community with one of these C2 systems. So I think as people are looking for a potable or portable drinking water source, it's more for the volume, the convenience, the quality of making sure that you have a purified product that is reduced in contaminants of viruses, biologicals, bacteria, and cysts, but also is easier to deploy than, say, 5 containers of half liters that one of these could very easily support a community for a year.
Yeah, and I think many people saw this where they were actually hovering over with helicopters, throwing out bottles of water to people, and people are trying to catch that. I mean, these are like missiles that are coming out of these helicopters.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's just it's just amazing how in a sense ill-prepared we were. But looking at this system we have here, so how can they work with like the law enforcement, the first responders, the military, National Guard, also the U.S. military, and what they're doing within the United States itself as far as providing clean, safe drinking water?
Well, a few things. So you mentioned dropping things out of airplanes and helicopters. We've been producing for humanitarian efforts. We actually reverse engineered it. We started in humanitarian efforts, and now we're more on the retail segment. But we also throw our cubes and our jerry cans out of helicopters and planes to emergency relief locations where they physically cannot get to those locations. So for the military or emergency responders, just picture in your head one of these systems on the back of a flatbed, small 10-foot truck driving down the highway with 15 semi-trucks loaded with half-liter bottles. The reality is this system will do the amount of water that's on those 18-wheelers and then some. So it gives you a consolidated location. It also allows you to do your triage or your medical services if people come to this, as this is truly the water cooler, portable water cooler. It allows a community to be serviced with potable and portable drinking water in about an hour. It takes these to be set up. So you can essentially move this into a military garrison, into an evacuation center. You look back at New Orleans, you could have put one of these in the New Orleans Superdome, and you could have provided enough water for everybody that was in that stadium until relief could come and restore the water mains and water systems. So it's truly a way of reducing the impact on the environment and providing a purified water base to the masses.
Yeah, and the whole thing about this too, as I understand it, Joseph, is that you can take all this water, it's outside, it could be whatever quality, run it through this system, and all of a sudden you've purified it at the site. Now that means you're not, and that's you're saying about these 18-wheelers. And what was the equivalent to one of these versus the number of semis that you had to have to get the same amount of water?
Depends on how you stack them up and how many you have on it, but 2 million, just do the math. It's 4 million half-liter bottles is what this system will essentially do. So most of them come in a 24 case, but if you do the math, it's a significant volume of semis.
Yeah, but the whole thing about this is doing it day in and day out. So, you know, when you deliver that, the semi drives up, then they got to go off somewhere else, load up again, and bring it back. So it's a very different
situation. And the question is, what do you do with the plastic that people consume the bottles? Where do those go?
Yeah, and I've been in a country where they say they have the most plastic bottles, and it's a mess trying to get through to the beaches and walk down the streets. So you're saying that it is easy to set these things up? Is that what you're saying as far as the how these actually work? And tell us about the difference as far as these liters. What's a liter for the American audiences?
Sure. So if you want to do the conversions on this, we haven't done them for these particular models. The C2 will do up to 2 million liters. Now, essentially, it'll hold 750 liters inside the cavity itself. It's a UK manufactured product, so everything comes in liters. I can do the quick calculations for you. That is the more the community base. Now, for those that want something very portable, and what the Department of Defense is looking at and will begin to use, they're using it in the UK currently and other countries in Europe, is the 20,000 liter jerry cans, the 10s and 20s. So very similar to like a gas can, except it has the water purifier on the inside that will do, 20,000 liters or 10,000, depending on what membrane size you get. I have in the center a slide of we're always looking at new research and development. So the C2 is great, and even though it takes an hour to install, it's still pretty big. So you have to have an aluminum stand to put it on to support all the weight. The one in the center is what we're referring to today as a mini C2. That system there is approximately 4 feet long by about 12 inches, and it will do 500,000 liters of water.
Joseph,
so
we're gonna run out of time. We're already running out of time. What do you see as far as expanding lifesaver type systems going out to help communities that are challenged, whether it's in the United States or the African continent or the South Pacific? And we got to be quick.
So we always do our best to work with NGOs or any government agencies that are looking to get purified water. Essentially, we'll always look at R&D and availability to get these in their hands.
That's fantastic. This is Joseph A. Silva. He's the Senior Vice President, General Manager, North America Icon Technology Systems. Dan Bicz, my good buddy, sitting right beside me, Managing Member of Pangea Water Solutions. And thank you for being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
So how was work?
It was 1,300 hours. My math class from 302 was in the trenches. Davy Roth had it the worst. Fractions were coming at him left and right. He just didn't get the damn things. 2 days ago, I tried to teach him what 1/4 of 1/2 was using different sizes of blocks. Yesterday, I tried again by dividing up pizza. Both missions failed.
Oh, no.
But today, I was ready. I created a combat math game where the only way to beat the enemy is to out-fraction them. Davy conquered every last denominator. My game was so successful, the principal is deploying it to math squadrons all over the school.
Anywho, how was your day?
Oh, today my boss treated the office to salad wraps.
Salad wraps.
I know.
150 over 90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
We're back to the Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we're looking around the globe in 144 different nations. And we're looking for these, really the best technologies, the best of the best, but at the same time to have practical solutions as we go through a planet that's coming under increased climate change impacts, more severe weather events, and really impacts in societies that felt they were secure, that they had the grid system for electricity, for water, for sanitation, all these basic human needs. And yet at the same time, we have almost 3.5 billion people around the planet that really don't even have these types of systems in their own communities. And so now we're looking at how do we blend all this together? How do we find these best practices that maybe can be taught to us in the developed world that actually they're dealing with as far as in the emerging economies, as they're called. And we have someone that's coming on, we're going to be talking about waste and dealing with this waste. And this is Stephen. He goes by Steve E. Pellegrene. He is Executive Vice President, Business Development of what's called Clean Waste Systems. He's coming by Skype. And sitting right beside me is our good friend that comes on a fairly regular basis. This is Dan Bicz. He's the managing member of Pangea Water Systems, LLC. Dan, thank you for being back.
Thank you, Sam.
And Steve, I think you're already here by Skype, correct? He's not. Anyway, you actually are the one that's very familiar with the clean waste systems. Tell us a little bit about that, what you know about it, Dan.
It's the cleanest way to get rid of the poisons created by hospitals. Specifically, it sterilizes the medical waste and shreds it.
Yeah, but you know, we're talking about these severe weather events, and of course we've been talking about water and all these, but you know, waste is really one of the issues in all of these things, and it's something we don't really talk about, is that you have all this toxic waste out there, whether it's from hospitals or health clinics, coming out of you know, the long-term health care facilities, even you know, farms and all that all have different types of waste. And so why is it so important that in these days of these increasing number of severe weather events that we need to be looking at water, we need to be looking at waste, and also food? Why do we have to look at all three of these, and why are we vulnerable these days?
Well, it's the trifecta of poisons that is impacting the entire climate. And in the case of medical waste, right now you're either burning it or burying it, and it either goes into the sky or it goes into the ground and potentially leaches into the groundwater. So medical waste is truly a poison that impacts all three of those.
Yeah, and the whole thing about this is, and looking at the sources of all this waste, is that when you have these severe weather events and you have 1 to 2 feet of rainfall coming into these areas, you've got this massive flooding. All of this is in the ground. It starts to come back up, whether it's in these landfills or what have you. And so, I mean, we need to seriously look at this, and I think that's what you're talking about as far as this clean waste systems, that you're reducing, you're sterilizing, and wherever it goes, it's only a minute amount compared to what it was earlier. Is that correct?
Well, that is correct, Sam. And when you think about it, hospitals are creating poisons that part of the whole cycle needs to be cleaned to a better degree, and that's what Clean Waste Systems does.
Yeah. Steve, I think you're with us, correct?
I am.
Welcome.
Hi, Sam.
Hey, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. You know, we're just talking about, you know, these early slides and why, you know, dealing with the medical waste, but all types of solid waste is becoming more and more important because we have these severe weather events is not only we're losing water, we're losing access to food, but also we're actually poisoning the very, water and the ground and the air that we have. So why is it so important that we really start looking very seriously at dealing with medical waste as one, but all types of solid waste, and in a ways that we haven't really thought about it before?
Yes, it's a wonderful question. And the simple answer is because we have the responsibility to do it and we have the know-how to do it. So that's where my company really comes into play. We manufacture medical sterilization equipment. It's equipment that sterilizes medical waste for the healthcare market. And we take this very seriously. We see the hospitals that are out there today, both actually US and internationally, that have done things with their waste, for the last 60, 70 years the same way. And even though they've tried to do a lot better job with it, and they have, the same old technologies are still out there. There's still incineration that's out there that burns a majority of the waste. The incinerators have gone down in number, thankfully due to the Clean Air Amendment Act in the 1990s. However, it still is the majority of waste that is being treated is through these incinerators. So the other format is another heat-based autoclaving, rotoclaving, and also microwaving. These are technologies that came about when incineration went down in numbers. And so these types of technologies came into the forefront. And again, they're baking the waste, they're steaming it, they're pressurizing it. In a lot of cases, they're not shredding the waste, making it unrecognizable. And afterwards, they're bringing it to a landfill. And so again, going back to what can the healthcare industry do differently and better, we feel they can grasp newer technology that is out there, that is available, that we offer, and apply for it. I see some of these pictures coming over on the screen, and you can see the caustic, harmful type of processes that are going on today in this industry, both for the hospital market and also for those that are third-party haulers, if you will, that pick this kind of waste up from the different hospitals or different generators across the world. And so it's a big problem, and we think we're on the forefront of really solving this problem and giving this whole industry a green solution.
The whole thing about it, Steve, is that, and we have a question from Esther in Charlottesville, and I'm going to tie that in with my question I have here with Esther's. But looking at this, you have these long-term health care facilities. They literally are spread all over, the United States, the continental 48 states. Internationally, if you look at China, India, South Africa, Brazil, they have aging populations. So no longer are this kind of toxic waste concentrated just in hospitals or maybe smaller medical centers, but it's really spread across the whole society. So the question from Esther, and my question too, is how do we deal with this when you have this waste absolutely everywhere, and then you have this huge severe weather event, and all of a sudden all this starts floating down the rivers, it goes into the channels, into the canals, and I mean, you're just, in essence, we're poisoning the whole system. And it takes years or decades to get rid of all this. So what is it about the ozone system that you have that's quite different, but it's allowing us to feel like we can be more safe as far as the communities in which we live?
Yes, our system is really a forward-thinking type technology. It's a non-heat based. We're using the power of ozone, which is a natural oxidizer. It's something that's placed, from Mother Nature in this. We're oxidizing the material with the ozone. And so what we feel is we can just do it a better way than the incineration. We have no emissions. So the way it works in our systems, and I have to apologize, I hear myself in my ear here, so. But we shred the material so that it's unrecognizable. So it's very beneficial for the hospitals to understand this, because a lot of this type of waste has HIPAA information that's a part of it. And so for us to take the material and to shred the material and then apply the ozone to treat the material, we really do a great job of thoroughly sterilizing it until it looks like a confetti substance, if you will, and then it's ready to go to the landfill. And we reduce the volume of what goes into our machine by about 90%. So it's very landfill friendly as far as it not taking up much space in the landfill. And again, we're sterilizing this waste with ozone. I mean, and ozone is a natural substance. It's a derivative of oxygen. So we create this ozone on our technology through an air compressor. We're just drawing in air. We're filtering that air. We're then running that air through an electrical charge so that we split the oxygen molecules to create the ozone, the 3-atom ozone, which is applied to the material. Just like a lightning strike through the sky. So ozone today, with the help of Mother Nature, is created really 2 ways: ultraviolet through sunlight, but also through an electrical storm. So as the lightning goes through the sky, it is splitting oxygen molecules, and the rogue atoms are attaching to other oxygen molecules, creating the 3-atom ozone, and helping to purify our communities and our planet. So we take that same type of power and we simulate that within our machines. So as you can see from on your screens, as the medical waste goes through our machines, we put ozone, we spray ozone thoroughly and have it contact all the medical waste, and within really minutes, it's sterilized, and then the excess ozone reverts back to oxygen. So there is no emissions. It's very green friendly, and it's also a deodorizer, so it does a very good job of keeping down the odors that are another big issue, obviously, with this type of waste.
Steve, we're going to lose you just in a few seconds. What do you see for the expansion of using this type of ozone system on toxic waste over the next, say, 5, 10, or 15 years? You got to be quick. Running out of time.
Yeah, I feel that this is going to do wonders in this industry. It's going to change it from burning to ozonating. It's on the market today.
Steve, we're going to lose you. This is Steve Pellegrene. He's with the Clean Waste Systems. Dan Bicz sitting right beside me, Pangea Water Systems. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. Already posted it.
I got a crick in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. But if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes.
I mean, like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know.
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you...
We're back to the Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of Emerald Planet TV. We come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations looking for those 1,000 best practices, technologies, services, products, and processes as we move through the 21st century. And as we go to a planet of about 9 billion people by 2050 and possibly 12 to 13 billion by the end of this century, how are we going to be able to provide all the basic infrastructure as well as the food, the fuel, the fiber, and the water, of course, that we're going to need for all these citizens that are joining us on planet Earth. And so we're looking at some of the technologies time to time on Emerald Planet TV. They're actually there, off the shelf, making a real difference, but it seems like that many municipalities, the first responders, even the U.S. military are not aware of these and how they can make such a huge impact to save people that are faced with these, what they call severe weather events, and at the same time dealing with climate change. But we have a gentleman that's actually looking at solid waste and how that needs to be dealt with, because as we have more of these severe weather events, this waste is actually being picked up through the flooding or through hurricanes, through the wind or whatever, and then being distributed and actually poisoning not only the water but also the land and the air. This is Stephen. He goes by Steve E. Pellegrene. He's Executive Vice President of Business Development for what's called Clean Waste Systems. He's coming in by Skype. And sitting right beside me is Dan Bicz, who is the managing member of Pangea Water Solutions, and Dan comes on from time to time on Emerald Planet TV. Glad to have you back, Dan.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks for being with us. Steve, are you there by Skype?
I'm here.
All right.
I'm here, Sam, thank you.
We're glad to have you. Looking at, we've been talking about water. We talked about, the solid waste. But, really there's something about waste we don't really think about when we're having these severe weather events. We think about the water, the food, of course. But, really dealing with waste is one of those areas that we have to be more and more concerned about. So in talking about medical waste, but actually all types of solid waste, because it's contaminated one way or the other. It's either used in the home or in the factories, on the farms, put out into the landfills, many times in its raw state. So how do we deal with that, and how is the attitude of people that through your research you're finding are becoming more and more sensitive to these waste and what we need to do with it to, really protect the land, the water, and the air, as well as humankind?
Yeah, great question. And where we come at this is from treating the infectious waste. The infectious waste is anything that can be potentially passed on to people that comes out of, let's say, the healthcare industry, a hospital, a clinic, a dentist office, or even a tattoo parlor. Any materials that have been absorbed in blood or, some form of human flesh or mucus needs to be treated responsibly. And again, we just feel as though incineration and heating-based technologies are technologies that have been out there for a long time, and there's time for a change. There's better ways of treating this waste prior to that going to the landfill, Sam, as you mentioned. Because if we can reduce that waste by volume, if we can treat it with a non-emission, non-heat-based, strong oxidizer that Mother Nature has given us, green type technology, that was a mouthful, then why don't we use that? And I think this is why we're starting to get recognized. This is why our company, and this is why now we have customers and installations happening in numerous states across the nation and actually the world. We put a machine into Malaysia, if you can believe it. And Malaysia, again, a forward-thinking company, they grasped onto this. The machine that you're seeing on your screen right now, there's actually an incinerator across the street from this machine. This machine is processing the waste. Ozone, it can process 1,000 pounds an hour. It treats it, it makes it landfill friendly, and across the street, they're burning waste. And so it's a stark contrast, and we're very hopeful that our technology will catch on great out in Malaysia and all across Asia, and of course here in the United States.
Well, the whole thing about the medical waste, I mean, we have, every level of government, whether it's local, it's regional, it's state, and at the federal levels, are all somehow in, managing and regulating and controlling, this kind of waste. So are you saying that really these regulations are not actually doing what they need to do, or is it the fact that we're tied to old technologies and so we have to learn new ways of dealing with it? Because now you have 80% of the American population in urban areas. So it's no longer you can just take and put this anywhere. I mean, people are in these cities and they're becoming more compact all the time as we go to close to 350 million people just in the United States. And we add, 2 billion more people to the planet. How are we going to deal with all this?
Yeah, no, great comments and great question. I think you're absolutely right. I think the technology that we have that's out on the market is newer, it's cost effective, it's utilizing ozone, it's a deodorizer, and extremely effective when it comes to taking care of the medical waste. That's not to say the other technologies aren't doing what the states require. They are. It's just that with our fashion, it's a much more green fashion, and it's also operating-wise, from an operating cost-wise, it's less than a penny per pound to process medical waste through our machine. So if you want to compare that to the autoclaves out on the market, the microwaves out on the market, or even the incinerators, they can be as high as 5 to 7 for autoclaves cents per pound. And of course, incinerators can be much higher because of how hot they need to make their furnace in order to burn the material. So the regulations are there. We're meeting them. We're actually exceeding them. But we're doing it in a much more greener fashion and a much more cost-effective fashion.
Well, that's really important, because the whole thing about with EmeraldPlanet, we're looking at this intersect between the environment and economy, and as the costs as local governments, state governments, regional governments, even the federal government continue to increase, we have to be looking at it. But at the same time, we have to protect the planet, and I think that's what you're saying, Steve, is that we're balancing this where you're protecting the planet. We're trying to remove this medical waste, but also any type of solid waste, not just medical waste, needs to be treated in a very different way because, again, of these severe weather events. And my understanding is you're reducing the volume by 90%?
We are. We have inherent in our system, we have a shredder. So as you know, ozone is a contact compound, so it needs to contact the medical waste as it's being shredded. So we shred it into a very fine caliber. It almost looks like a confetti. And then we bring the ozone onto it and treat it. So all the waste that goes into the system gets shredded and it reduced by about 90% of its volume prior to going to a landfill.
Yeah.
So if you think about this industry, there are 6 million tons of medical waste generated annually. That's a lot of waste, and it's only going to increase when you look at the new healthcare law that's out there, the pharmaceutical drugs, where they're increasing day by day. and just the different types of sources that bring out this medical waste, it's going to continue to grow. Yeah. So we want to make sure we're sterilizing it well, we're able to reduce the volume of it so that we don't overflow our landfills.
Well, and the whole thing about it too, and I keep coming back to this point because we're talking about, again, these severe weather events, and more of this hazardous material is becoming, you know, in the public. When I'm saying into the public, when you have a flood in your home, you know, part of that is this hazardous waste that's coming out. And it doesn't matter whether it's coming out of a barn or a pigsty or coming out of a landfill. I mean, it's hazardous waste regardless. And so we have to really, we got to really think much more about this and what we're doing. Dan, I think you have the next question.
Steve, in addition to medical waste, I know you've been focused on trying to help the military deal with issues surrounding the open burn pits, and specifically you'll be displaying at the Pentagon the first week of October. Could you explain how the ozone treatment can help with these open burn pits?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's a great question, and yeah, we will be out at the Pentagon first week in October. We're looking forward to presenting out there, and you think about the burn pit issue really at the height of the war back in the early 2000s all the way up to 2010. There were literally hundreds of these burn pits where basically it was just a rudimentary way of getting rid of waste. And Sam, you mentioned all the different types of streams of waste that we deal with here, you know, just on a regular day-to-day basis, the hazardous waste, the infectious waste, we have cafeteria waste, we have all sorts of streams of waste that need to be taken care of appropriately and responsibly. The military was trying to do obviously a fast way of handling this waste with the burn pits. And unfortunately, they were burning that. So we think we can do a lot in this area by running that type of waste, a lot of that waste, the biohazardous waste, and probably, you know, 70% of it through our machines. There's also another technology that we're working on along with a great customer of ours, and it's their technology,
Steve, we're running out of time. We got about 30 seconds, and we're going to be out of here. What do you see for ozone being used as far as medical and any kind of solid waste over the next 5, 10, or 15 years? And you got about 10 seconds.
Yep, I think medical waste is going to be not only more more landfill friendly for a zero waste type concept, but also waste energy and waste to liquid fuel. And that's what we're working on today with a lot of our clients.
And that's what we really wanted to cover, but we'll have to do that another time. This is Stephen Pellegrene. He's Executive Vice President of Business Development of Clean Waste Systems. This is Dan Bicz sitting right beside me as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.